All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Did a Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, this is subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing our look at the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. I know, forever ago, but a lot of these are classes that I've just never had a chance or subclasses I've never had a chance to go over. And they're interesting. This week, we're actually going to be doing a little bit of a sacred focus. Today, we're going to be focusing on the Paladin, and then Wednesday, we will be focusing on the Cleric. So, very interesting. So, the Paladin Oath in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide is the Oath of the Crown. Now, if you're not familiar with lore behind paladins, paladins are quite literally holy knights. They dedicate themselves to a deity. The deity gifts them spells and abilities and allows them, in order for them to keep those spells and everything, they basically have to go out and do the deity's will. And from a lore perspective, I've always loved paladins simply because they're really interesting. I like the idea of having kind of a higher calling. I like the kind of combination spellcasting plus weapons-based classes and things like that. So overall, it's interesting. However, the Oath of the Crown is unique in the fact that you don't technically pledge yourself to a deity. I'll read the first line to kind of explain what it is. The Oath of the Crown is sworn to the ideals of civilization, be it the spirit of a nation, fealty to a sovereign, or service to a deity of law and rulership. So, Oath of the Crown, you could be a paladin that dedicates themselves to a deity that part of their portfolio is law, order, rulership, things like that, sovereignty. But this is, I think, the only or one of the very, very few. I can't remember if there's a second one that shows up later. But this is one of the only paladin oaths that can actually not be dedicated to a deity, which lore-wise creates some issues, most of which coming from the idea of where do they get their spells. In D&D, the way spells work is you have to have some way to interact with what's called the weave, which is basically the thing that allows anyone to use magic. The weave is what connects magic. Wizards learn how to manipulate the weave through study. Sorcerers learn how to manipulate it just intrinsically. Warlocks are gifted the ability to manipulate it from a more powerful creature. Druids are able to manipulate it through nature and their connection with nature. And clerics are actually gifted spells and the ability to manipulate the weave from their deity. Without their deity, they're unable to do it. And there's actually a period of time called the Time of Troubles in the Forgotten Realms where all the gods were made mortal and none of the divine spellcasters had access to their spells unless they were within a certain distance of their deity. I can't remember the specifics. I think it's relatively close. It was within like 10 miles or 100 miles, something like that. So the idea of a paladin being able to get spells and everything from just the spirit of a nation is interesting. You'll have to kind of decide in your campaign how you want to deal with that. But I'm going to talk about mechanically how this works and everything. Now, first things first, a little bit of refresher on 5th edition class design. Every class in D&D 5th edition is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. And in order to do that, they have these things that we call defining features. These are things that make them play very differently and are generally unique to the class itself. And they need to show up within 2 levels in order to be considered a defining feature. The Paladin has a couple interesting defining features. First one, they get right at level 1, is called Lay on Hands. Basically, they have a pool of hit points that they can just give to people. They can give it to themselves. They can give it to other people. They naturally have the ability to just heal. They eventually get the ability to remove poisons and diseases by using chunks of of that pool, and they get 5 hit points per Paladin level. This is a defining feature of the Paladin since it was introduced. The Paladin has always been able to lay on hands, so that's a thing that they did to do. At 2nd level, they get their other defining feature, which is Divine Smite. Basically, when a Paladin hits an enemy, they can choose to smite the enemy. And the way they do that is they burn a spell slot. Paladins are what are called half-casters. So they only get spell slots up to level 5, and they get significantly less spell slots than a full caster. But they burn a spell slot. Depending on the level of the spell slot they burn, they add additional damage. One of the things that Paladins get really, really good at is anytime you crit, you generally want to add a Divine Smite on, because Divine Smite adds damage dice, not a flat number. And when you crit, you double the number of dice you roll. So if you crit and then add a smite onto it, you will be rolling double the number of dice. So those are the 2 kind of really, really big things about being a Paladin. Is Lay on Hands, which basically means that they can be very, very good at support, and they're good at kind of pushing forward and being on the front line. They can heal themselves, they can heal other people, and then Divine Smite, they are burst killers. They do insane amounts of damage in small increments, and then when they're not smiting, they generally have a bunch of other things that they do. So yeah, let's look at the Oath of the Crown. Now, one of the things I generally do with Paladins that I don't do with a lot of other classes is I talk about the Tenets, because again, that's a huge part of being a Paladin. Is every oath will have tenets that you're supposed to follow, and it will massively change how you play the class based on your tenets. The Tenets of the Crown are law, loyalty, and courage, and responsibility. They have 4 to the tenets. Law is pretty self-explanatory. The law is paramount. It is the mortar that holds the stones of civilization together, and it must be respected. I would have a hard time seeing an Oath of the Crown Paladin that was not lawfully aligned, simply because law is such a huge part of the Oath of the Crown. Can you make one that's not? Sure. But it's going to be interesting explaining how they don't always follow the law when a part of their tenet is to follow the law, and the law is the most important to the thing. Loyalty. Your word is your bond. Without loyalty, oaths and laws are meaningless. Again, another very lawful ideal. Courage. You must be willing to do what needs to be done for the sake of others, even in the face of overwhelming odds. If you don't act, then who will? So thus far, all of these are just very much kind of heroic ideals, which fit really, really well with the idea of a paladin in general. And then finally, responsibility. You must deal with the consequences of your actions, and you are responsible for fulfilling your duties and obligations. So all of them are along this line of law, order, loyalty. You know, your word is your bond. So it'd be really easy to kind of view the Oath of the Crown as kind of a stick in the mud, and you can play them that way. Or you can play them a little bit closer to maybe like the idea of maybe like a a samurai style character where they are very dedicated to a specific sovereign or a specific person, to the point where even if their master, king, whatever it is doing the things that they don't agree with, because of their loyalty, they will do what they are told. Which is always an interesting character to play, because eventually the character has to kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm betraying my own, sense of self by doing these things that I abhor, but I'm doing it because of my belief structure, and it can turn into an interesting thing. So, yeah, let's actually look at the stuff. So, the first thing you get is you get oath spells. Effectively, oath spells are just additional spells that you have access to. You always have them prepared. They don't count against the number of spells you can prepare each day. They are useful. The oath spells for the Oath of the Crown are relatively simple. And all of them kind of fit. Your third level ones are Command and Cabal Duel. Again, stuff that kind of gets people to do certain things the way you want them. You eventually get things like Zone of Truth, Aura Vitality, and as you get to the real high levels, you can get things like Circle of Power and Gaius, which are both really powerful spells. But they all kind of have that idea of you're going to do what you're supposed to do, or I will force you to do it. So yeah, they work. They look interesting. They look like they can give you interesting choices. Yeah, they are oath spells. The other thing you get at third level when you choose your Paladin is your channel Divinity. Just like clerics, paladins can channel Divinity. Unlike clerics, it doesn't matter which subclass of cleric you pick. All clerics have access to turn undead as one of their channel divinities. Paladins, on the other hand, get both of their channel divinity options, or sometimes three, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. They get their channel divinity options directly from their subclass. There's nothing in the base class about channel divinity, and channel divinity works a little bit differently for a paladin than it does for a cleric. Clerics get a set number of channel divinities per day. They start with 1, and as they gain levels, they'll get 2, and then 3 times per day. The Paladin only ever gets 1 channel divinity use. Even though they have 2 different options, they only get to use it once per short rest. So Paladins are a little bit more dependent on short rest than clerics are. So that does make them a little bit different. The 2 channel divinity options for the Paladin are Champion Challenge. As a bonus action, you issue a challenge that compels other creatures to do battle with you. Each creature of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, a creature can't willingly move more than 30 feet away from you. This effect ends on the creature if you are incapacitated or die, or if the creature is more than 30 feet away from you. So this can actually be really useful for simply kind of setting up enemies for area attacks or protecting your allies. By issuing a Champions Challenge and then having your Paladin move away from the rest of the group, you will effectively sequester all the enemies away from your allies. And any ally that has a weapon with reach or ranged attack abilities can literally just take pot shots as you sit there, and maybe you don't even attack as a paladin. Paladins can wear heavy armor and use shields, so they're already going to have pretty high AC. If you take the dodge action every turn, every attack against you has disadvantage, and you have a really high AC. They may just, all your enemies may just spend their turns getting deflected off your armor and shields. As much as it may not seem very effective, if you work with your group really well, Champion Challenge can be really useful. The other option you have is Turn the Tide. As a bonus action, you can bolster injured creatures with your channeled Divinity. Each creature of your choice that can hear you within 30 feet of you regains hit points equal to 1d6 plus your Charisma modifier, if it has no more than half of its hit points. So, Turn the Tide, super, super useful. It is a group heal, which is always nice. Because it's anyone within 30 feet, that's effectively a circle with a 60-foot diameter. So you can pretty easily get all of your allies in there. A D6 with your Charisma modifier is not a lot. That's up to 11 hit points total. However, if you've got a party of 5, which is really, really common, that's 44 hit points you've just given back to your team. Now, it only works if there's no more than if they have no more than half their hit points. So this is something that happens after you've been fighting a bit and everyone's starting to get a little winded and the things like that. Because it specifically mentions that creatures that can hear you, I'd have to look at the incapacitated thing just to see. I think you theoretically could use this to raise allies if their hit points are at 0. If someone has actually seen like a sage advice on this or any other thing that clarifies that, let me know in the comments down below. But I would treat this as a really easy way for you to basically bring multiple allies up from unconsciousness, really simply, which is always useful. So yeah, those are your two channel divinities. Very, very different uses of it, but both of them have their situations where they will be very useful. At 7th level, you get Divine Allegiance. When a creature within 5 feet of you takes damage, you can use your reaction to magically substitute your own health for that of the target creature, causing the creature not to take the damage. Instead, you take the damage. This damage can't be reduced or prevented in any way. So this is effectively taking a hit for an ally that's next to you. Which again, because the Paladin can heal themselves, because they have a high AC and a decent size damage die, they get a D10, which is again the second highest damage, or not damage die, hit die you can have. So they generally are going to have pretty high hit points. They can take some extra hits, and they're going to be getting hit less because of their armor class. This is a really, really great way to ensure that your allies are not taking too much damage. Now, the only difficulty of this is you have to be within 5 feet of someone that's taking the damage. So this is really only ever going to be useful if for two different ways, really. One, if you have another melee fighter and you both are right next to each other. If you're doing like fighters, various flavors of Battle Masters and things like the Hoplite from Dale's supplement that she wrote. Those work really, really well because they do well when they're next to someone. Monks as well can be kind of useful, but this particular skill is going to require you to kind of play your Paladin a little bit more strategically and make sure that they're trying to end their turn as often as possible near another player or another character, so they can take advantage of that if they need it. The other time it's going to be really, really useful is if one of your squishies, a caster, maybe even a ranger, or a rogue that just doesn't have a high armor class, doesn't have a whole lot of hit points, has gotten put into a bad situation where they have someone near them and they can't get away. Simply going over and being next to them, even if they provoke an opportunity attack, you can take the hit and they can run away. Not only that, but the opportunity attack will use up that creature's reaction, which means they won't be able to do opportunity attacks against other characters or other things like maybe casting counter spell or other reaction based things. So Divine Allegiance can be used a number of different ways to kind of control the action of economy as much as possible. I'm not a huge fan of it requiring you to be within 5 feet because it's so limiting. But overall, it's still very useful even with that limitation. At 15th level, you get Unyielding Spirit. You have advantage on saving throws to avoid becoming paralyzed or stunned. This is actually unique, mostly because of the stunned resistance. The stun condition is a unique thing to the monk on purpose. Monks are the only class that can inflict the stun condition, and there are almost no monsters that can inflict the stun condition. It's designed to be a monk condition they inflict. Because of that, there's also very, very few monsters that are resistant or immune to the stun condition. Compared to any other condition that exists, the stun condition is the one that is most likely to go off, simply because, again, it's part of the monk's kit. This gives this Paladin something very, very unique. Now, whether or not you're dealing with... generally, if you're going to be dealing with getting stunned, like I said, there's a couple monsters that exist that can actually inflict this as a stun condition. They're very, very rare. Or your DM has to start giving class levels to monsters, which is something you can do. It's in the DMG. That kind of explains how you can give certain class levels to monsters. I tend to enjoy every so often throwing some monks at my players just to watch them squirm. But yeah, the stunned thing, that is really interesting in certain situations. Again, because it's so rare for monsters to do it, you may not be doing it a ton, or you may be dealing with it a lot. It's going to be entirely based on your DM. Paralyzed, on the other hand, is a condition that happens a lot. There are a lot of monsters that can inflict it. There are a lot of spells that can inflict it as well. It is a really bad condition. When you're paralyzed, you're incapacitated, and any melee attacks made within 5 feet of you that hit you auto crits. You take insane amounts of the damage. So being able to have advantage on saving throws to avoid becoming paralyzed is massively useful. Especially since Paladins get to add their charisma modifier to their saving throws. It's just part of the Paladin kit that you get later on. It's massively good. So there's very little chance that this particular Paladin is going to get paralyzed, thus preventing them from being the protector that they are. Finally, at 20th level, you get Exalted Champion. Now, the 20th level of ability for Paladin subclasses is always some sort of transformation effect. They generally last for about a minute, and they massively change how you play the Paladin. Not all of them work that way, but that's generally what you expect. This one is a little bit different. You can use your action to gain the following benefits for an hour. So this is a lot longer than a minute, but because of that, it doesn't quite change how you play the Paladin nearly as much as, say, the Vengeance Paladin's transformation. But what you get for an hour, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons. Effectively, that's the same effect that barbarians get when they rage. This is very useful. It means, again, they can take a lot more damage, they can wade into combat and not have to worry. Your allies have advantage on death saving throws while within 30 feet of you. Another massively, massively useful thing. Death saves are terrifying. You roll the wrong thing, you roll poorly, and that may end your character. I have had one of my characters die. We were lucky enough to have a druid in the party. that was able to reincarnate him, but I almost lost Aether, actually, my very first Adventurers League character that I played. Yeah, it was not fun because it was, I believe it was the second adventure I had played with him. I did an 8-hour adventure as his first, and then his second adventure within, I think within like 30 or 40 minutes of starting, he got thrown off a cliff and killed. And it happened because he was paralyzed. So, yeah, it really sucked. So being able to give your allies advantage on death saves is really useful, especially since, again, it lasts for an hour. So yeah, super useful. And then you have advantage on wisdom saving throws, as do your allies within 30 feet of you, is the final thing. And that's another super useful thing. A lot of things that cause you to get paralyzed require wisdom saves. So that's really useful there in general. Wisdom saves in general are bad to fail. Because in general, they're going to remove control of your character from you. So having advantage on wisdom saves is massively useful. And again, this Exalted Champion really kind of exemplifies the idea that this Paladin is meant to be in the front lines, helping his allies and taking damage for them to ensure that they can do as much as they can. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, final thoughts. Overall, I still have an issue with the idea of a Paladin gaining spells just from their fealty to a king, or their patriotism or something like that. Like, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, based on how I think of paladins. But that is 100% a lore issue. That has nothing to do with the subclass itself. The oath spells, like I said, they make sense. They give you a lot of cool things that you can do. The channel divinities are both interesting. They both have instances where they're going to be very useful. Neither channel divinity is ever so limited that you're only ever going to use it in like 1 or 2 situations. Both of them are very useful in a lot of different situations, which I like. There are some paladin subclasses where your channel divinities are so specific that you will almost never use them. Divine Allegiance is cool, but again, the fact that it's limited to 5 feet is really rough, especially since paladins are known for their auras. I think they get their first aura at 5th level or 6th, somewhere around there. So I could totally see this being an aura-based thing where within 10 or 15 feet would make a little more sense. But other than that, it's a really useful ability. Unyielding Spirit, again, is very useful. For a 15th level ability, I don't know. Maybe I would have liked to see something a little more, but it's crazy useful. So, and then Exalted Champion. Again, when I'm looking at a paladin, I'm going to go to the 20th level paladin subclass. I'm going to go to the 20th level just to see what cool, amazing thing I can do. And this just doesn't feel amazing. It's useful, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like, whoa, that's totally cool. This is just like, oh, I can use that. Which again isn't a bad thing, but it's not a good thing either. So overall for the class, I'm a little bit lukewarm on it. I don't think it's a bad class or it's underpowered or anything. There's just nothing about it that really just kind of wows me. That makes me go, oh, I totally want to build a class, a character using this class. So, yeah. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon and turn notifications on so you never miss any of my videos. In the comments down below, what character could you see from fiction being an Oath of the Crown Paladin? I will take the obvious one out. Captain America is totally an Oath of the Crown Paladin. Like, Totally nothing like it. Just he has these supernatural abilities to throw his shield in ways that break the laws of physics. He dedicates himself specifically to the ideals of a country. Like he's totally an Oath of the Crown Paladin. What other characters in fiction, TV, comics, video games, whatever, could you see being an Oath of the Crown Paladin? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all from me today, and I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.